during the Super Bowl week of 2021, we broke our record for most pipeline created in 1 week. Creating great content is actually the cheapest, most cost-effective option. 5 of the Fortune 10 companies are Gong customers right now. If you want to be a millionaire, go be an executive at a company. If you want to be a billionaire, go start your own company.
Most marketers dream of having Gong's billion-dollar brand, but few realize that behind every courageous campaign, there's an even more courageous marketer. In today's episode of Billions, I have the pleasure to interview Udi Ledergor, Chief Evangelist and former CMO at Gong. I've known Udi for a few years now, and not only I've always been super impressed by how Gong's brand is so unique, but also by how great of a piano player Udi is. In today's interview, I want to discuss how to create a billion-dollar brand, how much money does it cost, and how much one should be rewarded for it. Udi, thanks a lot for accepting the invite.
What a hard intro to follow. Thanks for having me, Guillaume. I'm excited to be here.
You just released your book. Can you maybe show it so everyone can look at it? Courageous Marketing. I really loved it and really enjoyed it. And I think there are some golden nuggets and story, and I want to mention it and talk about it during this interview and also tie it to Gong's, story. Eventually, you said that Gong looked more like a $1 billion brand when it was only doing 30 million in annual recurring revenue. So how exactly did you create that perception, when you're small and you want to look much bigger?
Yeah, so here in the US, we call that punch above your weight. And what it means in the context of marketing and brand is, let me take you back a little bit to some of the classic books in the field. Jeffrey Moore wrote Crossing the Chasm, classic business book in the 1980s. And he talked about the chasm where most companies go to die between selling to the early innovators, the early adopters, and the early majority, right? So you'll always find a few early adopters that love having the latest iPhone and the latest B2B software, and they'll try your new product. The problem is getting beyond those early adopters to the early majority. When you get to the early majority, these buyers are much more conservative and they don't want to try the latest technology. The latest technology scares them. They want to see that everyone is using something or that some regulation forces them to use something before they will buy it. So how can companies cross that chasm, bridge it from the early adopters to the early majority? And there's 2 main motions you need to do that. Number 1 is have a product that is ready for that early majority, which means if you're selling to enterprises, it really has to have enterprise level security and privacy and all the compliance stuff. 2, great marketing can make you appear to be much bigger than you really are. And that is a really, really big component and my area of interest. How can a small startup look much bigger than it is to appeal to those larger buyers? Because if you think about it, the catch-22 most startups have is that they're trying to sell to much larger companies, but those larger companies, they don't want to buy from a young startup because you might not have the funding to even be around in 2 years. Your product is probably not tested on enough enterprise customers. You don't have customer references. You didn't build out the full product. There's lots of good reasons why enterprises don't want to buy from a startup. But great marketing can make your company appear to be much bigger than it is. And that way you are more appealing to the large companies. You still need the product to deliver, but at least you get a foot in the door. So that is something that was my focus area for many years at Gong, as when we were very small and we were trying to get the attention and get these big companies to use our product. So what I found is that there are many, many ways that I consolidated into a formula or framework that you can use, any company can use, to look much bigger than you really are. And in short, the framework goes like this. 1, you find a media opportunity that's typically associated with big advertisers. So a classic example would be if you see a billboard on Times Square, you know that's coming from a big advertiser, right? Because that's where Netflix announced their new series. That's where Apple announced their new iPhone. So you know that a Times Square billboard is something iconic that's usually done by a big advertiser. Step 2, you find an affordable way of sneaking into that medium and using it. So you don't have to spend $1 million on a billboard in Times Square. In fact, you can buy an on-demand billboard for $500. And I give all the details in the book for how to do that. You might just get the billboard for 1 hour, but you've now got a billboard in Times Square. But wait, we're not done there. The third step of the process is making some creative use of the billboard to get noticed. So that's a recurring theme across my entire book, and everything you do from events to content to brand, you have to be creative. Don't just settle for mediocre or best practices because those are boring. They're going to get you ordinary results. You need to do something different, right? So you make creative use of that medium. Step 4 is you get a photographer or a videographer to take great photos or videos of that billboard. Even if it's up for 1 hour, you get a photographer to take a photo of it with all the foot traffic walking around this iconic location. Step 5 is now you share that photo and video with your captive audience that you really care about. Because when I took out a billboard in Times Square, I didn't care about the random tourists on their way to see Phantom of the Opera. They're not going to buy my software. But once I had the photo of the billboards with all the tourists, I posted that to my LinkedIn and Twitter profile. And now hundreds of thousands of the relevant audience members are actually seeing this. And then the final 6th step is getting all of our employees to share that as well. And then I get a ton of extended reach for free. Gong has 1,600 employees, but even when we had 12 employees, which is how many we had when I joined, I got everyone to share it. Now, imagine every employee only has 500 followers, and many of them have a lot more. Multiply that by how many employees are sharing it, and now I'm getting a ton of free reach. In some cases, we even got our customers to share our posts, because if you use a billboard to say, shout out a customer that just won an award or did a funding round or using your product in a creative way, now the customer is proud of it and they want to share that billboard as well. So that is, in a nutshell, the punch above your weight framework.
That's super smart. And when it comes, to like creating something unique that will be shareable, what are the things that you've done apart from mentioning like a customer story, on a billboard? Were there anything particular that you enjoy?
Yes. So I think the approach for creating something that could go viral, that people will want to share, is starting the thought process with what do they care about? What would make them feel good about sharing? And most companies make the mistake of starting here, which is, what do I want to say? What is important to me? And when you start with what's important to me, you end up talking about, hey, we just released version 2.1.4. We have these 4 new features, and there are a few people who care about it, but most do not. But when you start with what my customers care about, there's a great book by Dan Heath and Keith. They wrote a book called Made to Stick. And they talk about the principles of why people share stuff, what sticks around. And Malcolm Gladwell wrote about it in The Tipping Point, like what becomes a trend. It has to be something that makes people either feel cool or feel smart or feel informed. So you want to be part of that. At Gong, we created the Gong Labs content series very early on that became very, very popular because we put an end to a lot of arguments that were actually happening in the real world about what works and doesn't work in sales. How many questions should you ask an executive when you get them on a call? How long should you be talking on the call? When should you talk about pricing, in the beginning or the end? Well, we found the scientific answer to all those questions. We even found and published research that showed that salespeople who use curse words like the S word or the F-bomb on their sales call have an 8% higher win rate. So you can imagine that when we published that, it went viral because everyone took out their most colorful vocabulary to respond to that on LinkedIn, and they were happy to share it and share their view. Either they said, yes, this is the shit I've been talking about, or they were appalled that we would suggest using this type of language in a professional setting. Either way, we win. That's a marketer's dream when you're creating a conversation about your content. And so that is the type of approach, like to think about what would interest them and how do I tie it back to what's important to me, but not the other way around.
Super smart. And I love what you were saying, when you create content, make sure that the person, either feel smart about it, feel informed, or feel cool. You also talked in your book about creating content that people will actually pay for, but doing it for free. So I'm quite curious, because Gong Lab is really amazing content. I've followed your content. It's really, really great. You can see that you've put a lot of effort. And I think for marketers, what's kind of tough to launch this kind of initiatives, it's measuring ROI is not always super easy. And the resource to invest in order to create content that people would pay for are usually quite huge. So how exactly do you go, by starting building this? What was the setup? What was the budget? And what was the whole process behind creating Gong Lab?
So let's unpack that into the launch process and budget, and 2, the measurement and ROI.
Okay.
So first, I can confirm that reality is the opposite of what you might have guessed. Creating great content is actually the cheapest, most cost-effective option versus throwing money on distribution because your content is so mediocre that you have to pay people to look at it. So think about it this way.
Nice.
When we were small, and most companies like you and me, well, we started a small company, I can't afford to be boring. I can't afford to be boring. Think about it. Large companies, think about your bank or your cable provider, they can afford to be boring because they have so much money they can throw on distribution. So they can spend $1 million a day or a week on propelling very boring content so that some people see it and act on it. You and I can't afford to be boring. We have to get creative. Creativity is cheap. You just have to get creative people to get in the room, come up with a great idea, and then for very little distribution budget, you get a lot of eyeballs. So that's the beauty about it. It's not great content is not only more effective, as in people will actually read it and act on it, it's also more efficient. It's the cheapest way of getting in front of your audience. So if you stay in the mindset of, I can't afford to be boring, then let's put in the work and be creative. So that's what we did with Gong Labs. You know how big the content team was? People was sure I have an army of content creators. I had one person writing the content and half a person, a contractor, data analyst, crunching the numbers. 1.5 people created Gong content for the first 5 years.
My marketing team is going to be, when I will share that with them.
Yeah, sorry if I ruined it for you guys. I'm sorry. But literally, I don't know what to do with an army of content people. Like, just give me 2 really smart people and that's all I need. So that is on the approach. Now, so it's very, very cost effective to get very creative and then spend very little on distribution. So that's number 1. Let's talk about measurement and ROI. So here's why it's important. And again, I'll go back to the basics for a minute because a lot of marketers ask me, well, how do I explain to my CEO and CFO? They just want leads today. And I'm telling them, no, we need to build content. It takes time. And then they say like, I don't care about that. Just bring me leads today. But here's the thing. Let's say I want to buy a car in 3 months. So what am I doing now? I'm going to websites of car manufacturers. I'm looking at their features. I'll go to YouTube and look at a few reviews of the cars that I'm looking at. I'll go to the reviews websites and compare the car models. But then I've decided on the car and I bought a car. Now, a week after I bought a new car, do I still care about all the features and prices of the other cars? No, because I'm now in my honeymoon with my car. I'm getting in love and falling in love with my car. I'm not going to buy another car for the next 3 years. But what are all the other car manufacturers doing? They're still retargeting me with all their ads for their car features, and they have a Black Friday deal now. And I don't care about all this. They're just wasting their money on showing me their product-related content, but I'm not in the market anymore. Now, take that story back to the B2B world where we usually live. It's the same thing. At any given moment, there's only about 5% of your TAM that is in the buying zone and cares about your product. The other 95%, they're simply not in the buying zone. Now, if you're wasting your advertising and marketing budget on showing them your product features and your special deals for the week, that is a complete waste of money. Instead, you could be targeting that 95% with a content marketing strategy, nurture them with something that gives them value, even if they're not buying your product right now. And the reason you want to do that is it creates memory links. It creates memory links between your area of expertise and your brand name, so that in 6 months or 12 months, when that audience moves from the 95% who doesn't care about your product to the 5% who are in the buying zone, you are the first brand name that they think about. So let's say in your case, you're trying to promote Lemlist to people who don't want to buy right now a sales engagement product. But what if you gave them great tips about sales engagement that they can use on any product? And then in 12 months, when it's time for them to update their sales engagement system, they think, oh, who's the biggest brand that I've gotten a lot of value from? And the first name I think of, oh, that's Lemlist or Lempire, whatever name you want to put out there.
Nice.
So that is the way that you do it. And it's really, really important to create those memory links, because if you don't do it, your competitor is. And so when they're ready to buy, they're going to remember your competitor and not you. The last thing I want to unpack there is you asked about measurement. So how can I measure content? So our content team definitely has measurable goals that tie into demand gen and pipeline. Here's a very simple way of how we do this. There's many ways of engineering this. So when we put out an article, we usually put it out first where our audience is, which in our case is LinkedIn. Sales leaders and sales reps, they live on LinkedIn. They're looking for their next job, their next customer, they're hiring or they're looking to get hired. They live on LinkedIn every day, just like you and me. So we publish our articles first on LinkedIn. And as you know, on LinkedIn, you have to publish the article ungated. It's free for anyone to read. Now, there's maybe 1,000 readers will come in and read it because we publish it first by a human, because we know the people will interact with the human more than they interact with the brand profile. So we publish it under a human profile. But then what we do is in the middle of that article, and again at the end, we will put a link to a premium piece of content that's related to the same content. So let's say I put out the study about salespeople cursing having higher win rates. I could use a premium asset. Do you want the 20 top curse words that salespeople use successfully? Click here to download. Now, when you click there to download, this is, remember, in the public article on LinkedIn, that click takes you to a gated landing page on Gong's website. And there I ask for your email before you download the PDF. Now, if I correctly assume that you're in the zone to learn more about cursing on sales calls, I can get a very high conversion rate on that landing page. And in fact, we do see 70 and 80% conversion rates on those landing pages, that there's nothing fancy about them because it's context sensitive. I know you were already reading an article on this topic. I know you want to read more about it. So now I'm letting you give me an email and get that content. And this takes advantage of what Robert Cialdini called the reciprocity effect in his book, Influence. I first gave you value on LinkedIn. I didn't ask for anything in return. You already saw the value. So now you feel, okay, these folks are legit. They gave me value. And only now when you're asking for that premium asset, that's the first time I'm asking you for an email. And so you're very likely to give me your email at that point. Now, if you do that, I can measure the number of downloads of the premium asset on the day that I publish the public article. So if I published the published article and got maybe 3,000 eyeballs on it, and now I got 1,000 of them to download the premium asset, that is measurable. I just created 1,000 MQLs and I can start processing them. I have your email. I can now start nurturing you. I can have BDRs reach out to the right ones if they're raising their hands and saying that they're ready. So that is how we tie content marketing into the demand gen strategy.
That's super interesting. And I was actually wondering, because in your strategy, you start with, and you talk a lot about organic reach and making, content shareable. So I'm wondering, like, is this also like a way for you to kind of like test which content performs the best and then reuse the content that outperform every other content organically, and you reuse it as your ad funnel or something like this?
Absolutely. So the top 3 organic channels that were key to Gong's early success, one was organic social media. As I said, I could never compete with the big brands spending millions of dollars. I did not have millions of dollars. So I had to produce really good content that people wanted to organically consume. And we used to do like giveaways where we said, if you tag another salesperson, we'll give the first 100 people a copy of this sales book that everybody wants, or something like that. And then they started tagging each other and following Gong. So we quickly got organic followers, but it didn't cost me anything.
Nice.
So organic social media was our biggest channel. The second one was the email list that we were building. Again, completely organic. It costs you nothing to send an email to your house list. So we kept building that list and cross-pollinating between our social media followers and our email followers. So an example would be once a quarter, we'd send an email to all the email subscribers saying, hey, if you're not already following Gong on LinkedIn, click here to follow us so you never miss the latest updates. And we did the same on LinkedIn. We said, hey, if you wanted these to hit your inbox before everyone else, subscribe here to our newsletter. So we kept cross-pollinating the list. So those were the 2 biggest ones. And the third one was, because our content was so interesting, we could get invited to conferences without paying a sponsorship fee like most speakers have to, because their content is so boring that they have to pay to get on stage. But if you bring interesting content like salespeople cursing, sell more, they will invite you for free. They will pay for your flights to come and speak at the conference because you're adding value to their conference. So we got a lot of speaking opportunities and earned media. Like that story about swear words actually got picked up by fastcompany.com. Radio stations interviewed me about it. All this was free. So you get earned media when you produce content that's good enough.
That's really cool. And I was wondering, because we talked a lot about content, and there is an industry where people are selling like online courses, and we've seen a lot of people, leveraging some kind of manipulation technique, etc., etc. But in B2B, I've never really seen like a company really creating like advanced courses that actually work. Is that something you've tried, or have you ever thought about it as a strategy?
No, we didn't create that ourselves. I've seen companies do it more for the idea of testing whether their content is so good that people will want to pay for it. So, for example, Gainsight, the leader in customer success software, they created a whole education section. They called it Pulse Plus, because Pulse is their community name. So Pulse Plus. And for a while, it was paid courses. I don't know that they ever charged money for it, but it allowed their reps to give away free licenses to their education platform and for people to take courses, but it felt like a premium offering. Google just opened up, so for a while now, Google has had their courses on AI, like Google AI Essentials on Coursera for free, but it's a paid platform, so it feels like premium content. And now they're putting together a lot of other educational offerings because they want to get more people to use AI tools and then increase the use of their own tools. So we never did that because we're selling software. We're not in the business of trying to make revenue off of content. But I will give a couple of examples. When we did publish, and we still do, a ton of content that helps sales leaders and sales enablement leaders, we occasionally get an email like from a university professor who says, "Hey, I'm teaching a course on sales in Illinois. I just saw your latest Gong Labs. I would love to use this in my classroom. What would it cost me to license your content?" So when we get an email like that, we circulate it and celebrate because we just proved that our content is so good that people want to pay for it.
Nice.
And we get similar emails from sales enablement managers who read our content and say, "Wow, this is amazing. I'd like to use it for my internal team training. What would it cost to license it?" So I always respond, say, "It is free for you to use. Just credit Gong on the slides when you use it, but it's absolutely free." But that's how we prove that the content we created is so good that people would pay for it, which is such a high bar that many marketers don't even believe they can achieve that, but you can.
Nice. I really like it. And another thing that I loved in your book is you talk a lot about courage. And was there like a single moment in Gong history where courage kind of like changed the trajectory? If you have like a story that you could share.
I don't think there was a single moment. It was kind of like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So it was 1,000 moments where we took the courageous decision when we thought about what's our next event booth going to look like? What will our brand colors look like? What will our mascot look like? What will our content be about? What is the next medium that we can do that no one in our field is doing? So we became quite famous for doing a Super Bowl commercial when nobody in our space was doing that. We did some pretty elaborate out-of-home campaigns using billboards in very creative ways. We sponsored very big podcasts like Michael Lewis, the author of Moneyball, that became a bestseller, and a Brad Pitt movie. We sponsored his podcast. We did a lot of what you could call little moves, but every one of them has a compound interest effect. And when you do 1 and 2 and 10 and 100 of these, you quickly create a gap between you and everyone else in the field by consistently making the courageous decision and refusing to be mediocre or just follow best practices, which are in reality very, very boring.
Can you tell the story maybe of the Super Bowl commercial?
Sure. So the full version is in chapter 1 of the book, which I encourage everyone to read. But the short version of it was this. So we were just on the heels of one of our fundraising rounds. And just like anyone in the business knows, once you complete a fundraising, your inbox is flooded with people trying to sell you yachts and private aviation and villas and everything else. So one of those emails I got from Monica at CBS, and Monica said, "Hey, Udi, congrats on the fundraising. I think you'd make an amazing advertiser on the next Super Bowl." And for some reason, I decided to respond to Monica. I don't always have the chance to respond to all these emails. I said, "Monica, I appreciate you reaching out. I'm still nowhere near Super Bowl budgets, but happy to keep in touch for the future." And Monica immediately responded, and she said, "Udi, I think you'd be surprised if you give me 15 minutes, I'll show you how affordable your next Super Bowl commercial could be." And I said, "Okay, Monica, you've earned a call. You've piqued my curiosity. This is exactly the type of stuff I love learning about." So I took a call with Monica. And what Monica explained to me in a nutshell is this. She said, "Look, most people know that a national spot, a 30-second spot in the game, costs about $6 or $7 million. Back then, it was 5.5, but Today, it's like over $7 million for a 30-second spot in the game, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
That's why you only see like the biggest insurance companies and beverage companies. Pepsi takes those spots, and Farmers Insurance. Those are the companies who can afford $7 million for a national spot. She said, but here's what most people don't realize. Most of the commercials that you see are not the national spot, they're regional inventory. And if you buy regional inventory, you can pay a 5 or 6 figure number for the regions that you care about. And when those ads are served up to the audience, they don't know that this is coming from the regional inventory. So they can see Budweiser commercial, which bought the national spot for 7 million. And immediately after that, your spot, which maybe you bought for 100K in that region only, and the viewing experience is identical. So you get all the halo of the big spenders, but you're spending a tiny fraction of that. So I said, wow, that is interesting. And then I started looking at the price sheet for the different regions. I looked up in my CRM and I ranked the different regions by how many buyers and TAM I have in each region. And I saw that if I bought just 2 or 3 regions for maybe $200,000, I could cover 70% of my TAM for a tiny, tiny Super Bowl budget. So armed with that calculation, I took out my CEO for drinks. We were sitting at a rooftop bar here in San Francisco. And by the second drink, I told him, Amit, I just had a really interesting call from Monica about Super Bowl. And Amit was like, yeah, but that's crazy budget. Like, why would you be talking about that? And then I shared with him what I just shared with you. We cheered our drinks and he said, let's do it. And the next night we met our CFO for dinner. And Amit, my CEO, told the CFO, Tim, Udi got us the great deal on the Super Bowl. I think we should do it. At that point, Tim didn't have much of a choice. And from there, it went on to board approval. They took a chance on me, and it actually had amazing ROI. During the Super Bowl week of 2021, we broke our record for most pipeline created in 1 week. And it was a pretty great accomplishment. And I go into all the details of what we did with the creative and how I measured that in the book. So I encourage everyone to read that.
Yeah, that's insane. And just to clarify one point, whenever you said that you were looking at the CRM, were you looking at existing prospect or existing customers, or was it a mix of both?
I looked at both. So back in 2021, most of our audience was in tech, and in the US, today our business is global. We have offices from Singapore to Ireland and business all over the world. But 5 years ago, 4 years ago? Yeah, 4 years ago, almost 5. Most of our business was in North America in mid-market tech companies, which are concentrated in the San Francisco Bay Area. So in the San Francisco Bay Area alone, we had 60% of our customers, 60% of our customers in TAM. So I ended up buying San Francisco, New York, which is the second biggest tech hub. And like 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, I got a call from the Seattle CBS station who just had another advertiser back out, and they said, I can give you Seattle in-game commercial for $75K. You want it? I said, yeah, I'll take it. So I got Seattle as well for $75K in the last minute.
That's nice. That's nice. And if we go back, like, like a lot of things have evolved in the last years, especially with AI. So we've seen it like a lot more in content creation, in how we do marketing. So if you could like go back through, like the Gong story, but this time with AI, is there anything that you would change or you would do differently?
For sure. I think AI is a tremendous tool. Gong makes all of its business on selling AI for revenue teams. So I'm a big believer in the power of AI. I think what we're seeing today is that there's some good uses of AI in marketing, but there's even more abuses of AI in marketing. And it reminds me of something, I'm old enough that I've been in B2B marketing for over 20 years. 15 years ago, when I was head of marketing at another startup, some of my CMO friends were proud that they found that they could hire a blog writer in some developing country and hire them for $50 to write a blog post. And they thought they were saving a lot of money. And I was kind of scratching my head, wondering who's going to read that blog post. You're paying someone who doesn't know anything about your market, your product, your competition. Why would you assume that anyone's going to read that content? Back to the future, I think a lot of marketers are now using AI for similar use cases, which make me scratch my head. Why would you let AI create your content for you? I understand that it's efficient. It costs you almost nothing. And AI can be writing all day and all night. You can now publish 100 blog posts a day if you want to, but who's going to read those if they don't have a sharp point of view, if they don't have any novelty in them? Because anyone who understands how these LLMs are written and created they take the state of the art, they read all the content that they're trained on, and then when you ask them to create something new, they're just regurgitating words that someone has already written, maybe in a slightly new order, but they're not coming up with any exciting new ideas. So I'll steal an idea from another CMO friend of mine, Kyle Lacey, currently CMO at Toshiba. So he has a really cool example. He said, let's say you need to come up with a new billboard campaign and you've got your marketing team in a room. What most teams would do today is they open up ChatGPT and said, hey, we're trying to come up with this billboard campaign. Give us 10 ideas that we can use. And ChatGPT will easily come up with 10 ideas. Now, remember, these 10 ideas are just a regurgitation of 10 ideas that other companies have done 1,000 times before. And so statistically, ChatGPT is assuming that these are going to be the most popular ideas you want to read about. Now, the wrong thing to do would be to say, oh, here are 10 great ideas. Let's pick a few of them and develop them into our idea. The right thing to do, which Kyle suggests, is now we take these 10 ideas and we put them off the table and never look at them again, because those are the most obvious overdone ideas that everyone's been doing. Why would I want to repeat any of them? But now that we have our creative juices flowing and we have 10 pretty good ideas, now we can create the 11th and 12th and 20th idea that are actually original and then go pursue those. So that is a good use of AI that I consider for creative thinking. Because the worst thing any creative person knows is looking at a blank page. It's very scary, and if you're not in the muse to start writing, it can be very scary. So ChatGPT can eliminate the blank page syndrome, but use it in the right way, not to actually tell you what to do, but perhaps to eliminate what has already been done that you should not do. And then, of course, there are other great use cases of AI. Today, if I write a 2,000-word blog post and I want to resize it for 4 different social posts and an email, AI can do that beautifully, faster, and sometimes better than humans can. So that work becomes more efficient. But I would never use AI in its current capabilities to come up with the original ideas with that unique point of view. Imagine the things that I told you about, like when to talk about pricing or how long to talk on a call or when to use an S word. AI would never come up with that if Gong hadn't done it before. So we never would have come up with those original ideas if we had used AI to try and create those ideas.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I agree 100%. I think it's great, to just get the ID flow going, but it's not something that should replace like human work or like even the common knowledge of your team. And at the beginning of the podcast, we talked a lot about building a brand when you're like actually like a small company and acquiring customers, like punching above your weights, as you said. I'm wondering, because now I don't know if you want to share specific numbers, but you're in the hundreds of millions in annual recurring revenue. And what has changed in the way you are acquiring customers? Like, I think when we talked a few years back, I remember that your strategy was to continuously go up market and try to aim for bigger and bigger deals. How exactly do you make that move? Do you change also the way you do marketing? Like, because I think a lot of companies eventually down the road, I think this is the case for us, at Lemlist, like we continuously go up market, also not enterprise as you guys are doing, but steadily. And so I'm wondering, like, what has changed, what has worked or not worked, and how do you structure the team for it?
Happy to share what I can. So our 3 main growth levers right now are, number 1, continuing to go up market without sacrificing the down market. So I think when we talked a few years ago, most of Gong's customers were in the mid-market and even SMB businesses. That business has grown tremendously. But what's even more exciting is that our enterprise business is now a very significant part. When I say enterprise business, 5 of the Fortune 10 companies are Gong customers right now.
That's
5
huge.
of the 10 Fortune companies. Yes. I'm talking about the biggest companies in the world. I can share that almost all of the large LLM providers, so if you think about Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, all these companies, they're all using Gong to run their revenue teams.
Nice.
That's pretty darn amazing. So our enterprise business is a huge lever for growth. You can imagine these deals are 6, 7, and 8-figure deals, and almost all of them are multi-year deals. So their TCV is well within the 7 or 8 figures. That provides a lot of confidence in our forecasting and annual planning and growth planning when you know that you have these incredibly large customers one customer I can share because they were on our stage last month at Celebrate, our big customer event, was Cisco. Cisco just rolled out Gong to only 10,000 of their sellers, and they're in the process of rolling it out to the next 10,000 right now. So those are the types of implementations we're currently dealing with. And you can imagine that is a huge growth levers, because instead of getting 1,000 customers working on 1,000 deals that each has 10 salespeople, we now have one deal with at least 10,000 salespeople. It makes things a little bit easier, and it's not 1,000 times harder to close that deal. So
Nice.
that's one growth lever. The second one is geographies. So I shared with you that just a few short years ago, we did all of our business in North America. Now we do business in North America, but we have a significant part of our business in EMEA. So we have our Ireland headquarters, and now they have local people in Germany and France and England as well, selling to different regions in EMEA. Last year, we opened our Singapore office, which are now working in Australia, New Zealand, and that region of the world. So geography is a huge lever, and AI has also made it easier to very quickly localize our product and everything in it and support sales conversations in any language. I mean, it's pretty darn amazing. You can have a global sales team at a customer like LinkedIn, where maybe the VP is sitting in the US, but she has team members all over the world speaking in 12 different languages. She can get all the analytics and all the summaries in her language in real time while the call is happening in Japan or somewhere else. It's just crazy what AI allows us to do today for global teams. So that is the second growth lever. And the third one is new products. So 4 years ago, Gong had one product. It was our revenue intelligence product. Now it's evolved into revenue AI. But now that has evolved into a whole platform, or what we call the AI operating system for revenue teams, that has 3 products already in market: revenue AI, forecast, and engage. And we have 2 or 3 new products launching in the next few months. We already announced Gong Enable and Gong Orchestrate, and there's more in the pipeline. So by selling to the same customers who already know us and love us and see so much value, they go from one product to 2 or 3 or 5 products. Now we're dramatically increasing revenue from those customers. And we already have more than 1,000 customers using Gong Engage and over 750 customers using Gong Forecast. And all of those are already using Gong Revenue Intelligence. So they're using 2 or 3 products, and that allows us to increase our revenue while increasing value to customers.
That's insane. And for marketing, like, do you have specific strategies to increase the net retention? Because you mentioned, like enterprise customers, which are essentially, like signing multi-year contract, or the Cisco example, I think is great. Like they start with only 10,000 sales reps. And I'm assuming that down the line, they would keep increasing the amount of sales rep using Gong, as it's a really great product. Like how exactly, as a marketing team, do you vision the net retention? Because let's face it, I think we're when we look at valuation, when we look at public market valuation, net retention right now is something every investor is kind of looking at. And I remember that Gong's net retention is quite insane. So is it something that your department is incentivized on? And if yes, how exactly, do you measure the different actions that you can take towards increasing retention?
So I think customer retention and increasing retention and reducing churn is a company-wide initiative. It's not just a marketing initiative. So there's 2 things I'll mention, one on the go-to-market side and one on the product side. So one, on the product side, we made in the last 3 years a lot of progress in showing the value that customers are getting within the product. So for example, if you pick a metric that we believe we can improve, like percentage of quota achievement for a sales rep, we're now showing it within the product to make it easy for customers to gauge the value that they're getting. They don't have to guess. They don't have to ask us. We don't have to do some offline calculations to show them. It's in the product. Show them the outcomes. So that's a lot of work that we did within the product to make it clearer and easier. On the go-to-market side, the 2 things I would mention is, one, an extension of that. So when we do a QBR with an enterprise customer, the first thing we talk about is outcomes. When we start the deployment, we work with the customer to understand what are their biggest go-to-market goals that we can support. And then we map their Gong usage to those go-to-market goals. So if a customer says, look, we're a public company, we have forecasting issues, we need to be within 1% of our forecast so the market doesn't penalize our stock. So we are going to help them get to a much more accurate forecast in Gong, and we'll track that every quarter and we'll show them how they're doing. So when they see that they went from a 5% miss to a 1% miss thanks to Gong, now they know the value that they're getting and it's very, very clear to them. The second thing we found that the larger customers, they need professional services. I know lots of software companies, especially when they start, they say, oh, I'll never do professional services. It's not a profitable business. It's just a lot of headache and overhead because I've got to hire all these consultants and people. The problem is with enterprise, you can't get around it. You have to have professional services for enterprise. They expect it. They're happy to pay for it. So it doesn't have to be a cost center. You can break even or even make money on professional services. We sell a lot of professional services that go with Gong. We have a whole ecosystem of partners that are making millions of dollars by selling professional services around Gong, just like partners make money by supporting CRM systems and ERP systems in any large enterprise. Because these large enterprises, they're typically managing so many projects, they don't always have the resources and attention to fully manage this to the best success. So they want to buy these services either from Gong or from our partners. And that's something we build a world-class partnership ecosystem. We have over 300 partners now at Gong that are certified partners and our own professional services team. And when we put that and focus on the outcomes that are measurable and we show them in the product and in the QBRs, that's how we increase retention. No magic, just a lot of hard work.
Nice. Makes a lot of sense. I think we touched base a lot, on the different growth levers, some amazing stories that you've shared. I also want to touch base because I know we're almost running out of time. I want to touch base a little bit, on a side that not very few people mention it, but I think it's super important. Is as a CMO or as one of the early employee of a multi-billion-dollar company. How exactly did you negotiate your salary and overall package as time goes by? And what was your vision when it comes to stock options and how to get liquidity out of it? Because what I feel, I'm on the founder side, but what I feel and what I've seen is that often the team behind, the growth of the company doesn't get the same opportunity as the founder. But since, you're at a stage where the company did, I think, 6 or 7 rounds, can you maybe share some insight about it and about the journey?
Yeah, I can't share everything, but I'll share what I can. So first, the rule of thumb is pretty well known. The founders are the ones taking a huge risk, right? They sometimes have to work for years without a salary or much below market salary. You know what I'm talking about. So it only makes sense that they would benefit the most. And if you want, as my CEO once put it to someone who left our company to go start their own company, he told them, look, if you want to be a millionaire, go be an executive at a company. If you want to be a billionaire, go start your own company, because very few employees can become billionaires, if any. So that's kind of the rule of thumb. If you do want to make a lot of money by being employed at a company and you're not founder material, or you don't feel that you're cut out to be a founder, the 2 tricks are A, to join as early as you can, because risk equals reward. If you join like I did as employee number 13, I had no idea how Gong is going to work out. I got very lucky and probably had a small part in that luck of turning Gong into the juggernaut that it is. But the statistics were completely against this, right? The odds were against us. Most companies never make it beyond that stage. So join very early. And 2, join in the most senior position that you can. So all of those things, I joined as VP of marketing in 2016 as employee number 13, and a couple of years later got promoted to CMO. So it's that first hire grant that is most of my net worth today. And I got very lucky, as well as the other early employees. And of course, negotiate well. I mean, especially if you have a relationship or with the founders or experience in the field, this is your time to negotiate. Any subsequent equity grants that you will get will never get close to the first hire grant that you got. So that is the one to really negotiate well. And
when
it's
you
just
say that, do you
that's
talk
how,
about like the valuation of the stock option at which the strike price essentially? Like your advice is essentially
it's
in
both the
the yeah.
valuation and the quantity that you receive. So
Okay.
there's many creative ways of getting more equity up front. I've seen companies that for executives will say, hey, this is your like 4-year equity grant, but here's another grant that you can get automatically if we hit this milestone of maybe a certain number in ARR, or if you're in marketing, a certain number in pipeline. If we hit this number, you'll automatically vest this other grant. So there's ways of getting creative that the board will approve because they see the value, and they won't let the employee get that vesting unless the company is benefiting from it first. Just like with salespeople, like there should be no cap on their earnings. If a salesperson is selling a $20 million deal, they should earn a very fat commission, and they should make more than the CEO that quarter because they're bringing in a lot of money to the company. So companies and boards should be generous about their equity grants, just they are with commissions, because you want to keep the right people there. If you overcomplicate things, if you don't make people feel valued for their work, they're going to move somewhere else where they are. So I would say for folks listening, and you're looking to make your next billion, probably go found a company. That's the easiest way to do that. Not that it's easy, but easier than being an employee. And if you're joining a company as an employee, join as early as you can and in a most senior position as you can, and negotiate hard for the equity you think you deserve. Sometimes you can get creative, especially if the company doesn't have a lot of cash. You can say, okay, I'll settle for less than my market salary, but give me more in equity because I believe in the company. And in the early days, that's what the company has to give, equity, because they don't have cash. It'll be much harder if the company is already on a winning trajectory and raised hundreds of millions. Now they have the cash and they realize that their equity is very valuable. They're going to be a lot more conservative about handing out that equity. So if you join a company that's already doing 100 million in ARR, you're probably not going to get very rich from their equity. You could earn a good market salary and still see some. I mean, if you're joining OpenAI even a year ago, you're still making a lot of money, but those are the exceptions and the hundreds of the percent of the top companies.
Nice. And when it comes to staying private or going public, what's kind of like the overall strategy and kind of like timeline?
The overall strategy is that we're building a company that makes our customers successful. That has always been the number one goal. That continues to be the number one goal. We have a very patient board of directors that are allowing us to pursue that strategy. Fortunately, because as you mentioned, we're in the hundreds of millions in revenue, as we published earlier this year. We don't need cash. We've raised about 600 million. We're making hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. So the bank is full of money. We don't need the liquidity. We don't need to raise additional money. And we're looking at some point in the future when both market conditions and our performance are at peak levels, then we'll consider our options, and we're keeping all of our options open for liquidity. Fortunately, because of the company's success, all those options are in our hands. We're not desperate to raise more money, and we can wait until all those conditions are optimal and then decide what's the best route for us.
That's awesome. And final question for you would be like, if you could give an advice to, I don't know, like any either like early stage founder wanting to build like a $1 billion company, or people working in marketing trying to build like a $1 billion brand, what would it be?
With the risk of sounding obvious, the first thing is to focus on a very painful problem that affects a very large number of people, and create a really, really good solution to that problem that creates raving fans. That is the bare minimum. If you look at every successful company, they've done that. They've addressed a very large market with a very painful problem and came with a really good solution that creates raving fans. You and I would not be talking about my marketing if we didn't have that product at Gong. The only reason I was able to be successful as a marketer at Gong is because our product solves a very painful problem for lots of people in a really, really good way that makes raving fans out of them. And then the second thing, because we are talking about marketing, is to step away from the best practices, which in reality are very boring practices that everyone is doing, and develop a unique, sharp, different point of view. And then you enter the world of courageous marketing, and that's where the magic happens. And you could really make your company look bigger than it is in the early days and really differentiate it against the competition with courageous marketing. So that, armed with a raving fan product, that is the magic.
That's awesome. Udi, thanks a lot for your time. I really enjoyed it. And Wishing you the best for the future.
Thanks for having me, Guillaume. Thank you, everyone.